Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded, and let's just jump straight into it and the continuation of the series in regards to the number 33. So why is this interesting? Well, it's going to have to do with mapping and navigation. But as is so often the case, there has been a division between the exoteric and the esoteric, yet there is a strong overlap. I think it's not a good way to go, I would believe, to define them separately and to place them into as if they're polar opposites. There's a lot of crossover. So whatever religion, philosophical tradition, there are some big questions in life. That's, for example, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Well, you can find some of the crossover in this in regards to navigation. And what do you do in navigation? You measure angles, you measure time, and you measure distance, which will directly link to Hermeticism. So whether it's Thoth or Sheshet, Nuar and Fuzi, Nengashita, or Hermes Trismegistus, the god of travelers, geometry, commerce, weights and measures. God of travelers, the god of geometry, god of weights and measures. And what do people engaged in commerce do? They need to navigate. You can also apply this to military, navies, or moving armies. You need to know where you're going, how long it will take to get there, how far it is away. Well, that links because what do you do when you navigate? What are the big questions in navigation? Where am I? Where am I going? When will I get there? Very similar to these spiritual, metaphysical questions in regards to religion. So map making, navigation, cartography, geometry all links in together. This is a state library here in Sydney, New South Wales. And if you go just around the corner there, what you have here is a statue of Matthew Flinders. Inside on the floor of the State Library here in New South Wales, you see the Tasman Map by the famous navigator explorer Abel Tasman. And there we see an unfinished map. Now, here you get a better view from the balcony looking down. You can see started to map Australia. Now, parts are missing, and also it was believed that New Guinea and Indonesia are connected to Australia at the time. I mentioned Matthew Flinders. That's a statue next to the Mitchell wing of the library. This is a map by Matthew Flinders. It's the first very, very accurate map of the coastline of Australia. He was also the first person to give the name Australia to Australia. Back then it was called New South Wales. What's Western Australia was called New Holland. Under Governor Macquarie, Lachlan Macquarie, so important in bringing in street plans, town plans, architecture in general, and incorporating very special measures and angles into the street plans. He, through his dispatches back to England, that's where Australia became Australia. Before that, it was New South Wales. But so Matthew Flinders coined that name, Australia. Oust is in south. Now some would even, okay, that's something else, but this come from Matthew Flinders. He was a Freemason. Governor Lachlan Macquarie, even in the more tame biographies, describe him as a conscientious Freemason, a very strong practitioner of a craft, not just a member of it in terms of a social club. So if we compare the Matthew Flinders map and the early one, we see there the development of the map. As of course, maps got better. Now the Tasman map, I've also noticed the ruler, the compasses, there's other things going on. But there's another really, really important thing happening here. And we'll look at these comparisons now back to the Tasman map. And we're focusing on this rosette here. Now you'll see there or there, over here as well, these certain points in this map, because this goes to what we have is a compass wheel which have 32 points around the 33rd central core, 33 rays around the 33rd core. That's where you see one example there. Of course we have other ones. Now we bring up the famous Perry-Reese map. What's happening here? Well, we have the same thing. So we have these rosettes, compass wheels, with 32 rays emanating from the 33rd central core point. Here's another example. So the Perry-Reese map is what's this system of mapping Portolan or Portolan mapping. This is the old mapping system. And here's another example of a Portolan mapping system based on the number 33. Yet another example, again, 30 from any of these compass wheel central points. What you have is 32 rays extending from the 33rd central core. So where you are is 33, and there are 32 options. Let me pause a moment. This is a very important famous person in regards to Australia and navigation is Captain Cook. This is his compass again, and what you have is 32 points around the 33rd central core as well, so it's pretty much a constant. But back to the State Library of New South Wales, Matthew Flinders map just around, Matthew Flinders statue just around the side there. Of course, Freemason. Now, Matthew Flinders was the great-grandfather or the grandfather of the famed Egyptologist Matthew Flinders Petrie. Matthew Flinders Petrie, just before he left for Egypt, did the first geometric survey of Stonehenge. I could go into, because he did it before the alleged, before it existed. This guy had surveyed it properly, very accurately, but that's something else. But and the son or the grandson of Matthew Flinders Petrie went on to do some very important geometry as well. So it's a very illustrious family in that sense. But so the Matthew Flinders, the Tasman Map, and this is the map of Australia by Matthew Flinders. Very important because we see here a separation between the old and the new, where he has both the old and the new. And by that I mean what we have is longitude and latitude, the more modern mapping system. But we also have the 32 around the 33rd core point. Where am I going? When will I get there? Navigation. So there's this physical sense of navigation and not having to know where you are, what the time is, how far it is away, to know where you are going. But this would also extend, because the people engaged in this were also so often clergymen, astronomers, geometricians, philosophers, and just generally hermeticists. So they're actually asking both these questions. So whether it was Descartes or Leibniz and these other famous mathematicians, astronomers back, they did not separate these questions. They were Renaissance men. They were engaged in multiple fields, and this artificial separation of topics that we have now, sadly. But here we see both the modern longitude and latitude system as well as the older mapping system, so a blend of the old and the new. So navigation in a spiritual sense, but also in a very physical sense, and so important to civilization, culture, and these other aspects. And especially if you look at the history of these particular people, what they were studying, so whether it was John Dee, Edmund Gunter, and these esoteric people were also heavily engaged in Euclidean geometry, astronomy, and these types of aspects as well. Also non-Euclidean geometry, but Okay, now let's fly over to Portugal. This is a monument to the discoveries in Lisbon, in Portugal. Just happens to be 66 feet long, and I'm going to do that soon because that's very, very 33 times 2, but there's very important in regards to street plans and astronomy and some really other measurements of time, distance, speed. Anyway. So this, I think it was donated by a South African government. This is a compass rose next to the monument to the discoveries in Lisbon, Portugal. And we have this compass rose, which has 32 rays around the 33rd core. The monument itself has all these sculptures of famous scientists, navigators, and discoverers. And we have 16 on one side, 16 on the other, with Henry the Navigator standing at the front. So 16 plus 1, we have 33 again. 32, and with the 33rd, Henry the Navigator. Now this is the opening of the monument to the discovery. So as you can see, the monument itself is a boat. It's a sailing ship. And what happened at the opening? 32 ships of 14 nations were there for the opening ceremony, making the 33rd boat the actual monument itself. So we have the 32 around the 33rd compass rose. We have the 32 accompanying the 33rd discoverer, scientist, navigator. And we have the 32 ships plus the 33rd being the monument itself. UN flag has 32 sectors around the 33rd central core, American dollar. Also the connection between 13 and 33, but I'll do that sometime in the future. But the American dollar, 32 feathers on one side and 33 on the other. But okay, this is just some of the connections to the esoteric organizations and the measurable the sciences. So if you go back not too long ago, you can't separate the esoteric and the exoteric. The esoteric philosophers, investigators were also the ever so important fathers of science. So, for instance, Isaac Newton was an alchemist and very, very interested in mythology and other aspects. Now, you also find the same with Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein or Oppenheimer. It's just not spoken of because now it's become very unfashionable to talk about these things. But the people who established our weights and measure systems, navigation systems, science in general, were hermeticists, and this is really undisputable, but it's just not fashionable to talk about it because, well, it's the current year and we shouldn't say these things because we're all rationalist materialists now. Let's expunge this part of our history because it makes us uncomfortable. Well, no, if you forget your history, you're doomed to repeat it. So what we have is quite an elaborate set of systems of measurement, navigation, philosophy, and all these are actually blend in together nicely, and we find that these ever so important people who are so important to establishing, whether it's constitutional law, universal literacy, and all these things we take for granted, were actually these evil, Illuminati connected people. But well, it's a shame, to be frank. And this is just another aspect of 33, whether it's a symbolic aspect in architecture, whether it's a measurable element in astronomy, whether it's got to do with cartography and navigation. And there are just these solid links between these because you follow the individuals, you follow the architects, you follow the artists, you follow the people ever so important in setting up standards of weights, measure, time, navigation. They all come back to the same theme, the same systems. It just carries on all the time. But it's, again, yes, it's now very unfashionable. It's not not cool anyway. But that's a shame. So with that, navigating in the physical sense, but also the weights and measures, Hermeticism, Hermes, and also the philosophical aspects which blend over. We shouldn't be separating esoteric and the esoteric because the esotericians were also masters of geometry, navigation, alchemy / chemistry, and these other aspects. So the important questions in the mortal realm are also very similar to the metaphysical spiritual questions that plague us as well, or should I say plague, that still live with us anyway. But with that, hope you enjoyed. You got something out of it. I'll be adding this to the 33. I've got a playlist, so I've done a whole bunch of on 33, 288, and some other stuff. But this will all be in the playlist. I'll try to remember to put the playlist link in the description. But yeah, with that, cheerio and have a good one.